Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me? Am I coming in okay?
I got you.
Good. All right. Hi, I'm Vanessa Barrientos. I'm a community development liaison here with SonderMind. And we are thrilled to have you here for our episode 2 of SonderMind's webinar series, Going There. Today's web series focuses on speaking truth, sharing knowledge, and building community in this time of need right now. And this is far from just good information. It's really good therapy for all of us and everything we're going through right now. So we're very excited to support our communities over the next couple of months with these weekly virtual events. And they're going to cover a range of both supportive and interesting topics. So again, we're very happy to have all of you here joining us today. A couple of housekeeping items. We have muted our guests for this presentation, although I do encourage everyone to use the Q&A section to type questions throughout, and we'll take some time to answer during. And then at the end as well, we'll go through and get any questions that we missed. We are going to be recording today's webinar, and we'll be sure to send that email over to you with these slides to the email you used to register. So if you'd like to post about this webinar, please feel free to do so and use the hashtag #GoingThere with SonderMind. Today we're honored to have with us Joe Smarro of SolutionPoint Plus LLC to share some insight on how to deal with the constant changes that are going on right now with COVID-19. If you don't already know, Joe Smarro is the co-founder and CEO of SolutionPoint Plus LLC, which is a national consulting, speaking, and training firm specializing in mental health, employee and organizational wellness, as well as de-escalation, emotional intelligence, and crisis intervention training. Joe is one of the original members of the San Antonio Police Department's mental health unit, where he helped make it one of the most nationally recognized police programs in the nation. He's been a main stage speaker at TEDx San Antonio 2018, I See You. He's also been featured on ABC Nightline, Brave New Films documentary, and he's also featured in the award-winning HBO documentary, Ernie and Joe, Crisis Cops, a film which highlights the significant role he plays in his community interacting with those individuals that are suffering with a mental illness. Joe currently resides in San Antonio with his wife, Jessica Smarro, who happens to be a licensed clinical social worker and is a behavioral health manager for the Bexar County Department of Behavioral Health. His hobbies to relieve stress include playing golf, tennis, soccer, reading, and being in or around water. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you everybody that is here. I'm going to share my screen to put up our presentation. Are we seeing that, Vanessa? Are we up? Okay. Beautiful. All right. So yeah, thank you for that introduction. Thank you to everyone that's on here. I appreciate everyone taking some time out of their Good Friday to be here with us to go over really what my portion is just some tips on self-care. And we know that you guys are in the business of helping other people. And in my other day job, I'm a police officer. And so I've been on a mental health unit now for the last 11 years or so. And so I get what it's like to serve people all day from that capacity and then neglect our own self-care needs. And so I created this class to help. And what I learned really early on was that when we talk about self-care, it really does transcend profession. It doesn't matter what we do for a living. We're in the business of people, and everyone on this call really understands that firsthand. That you all are serving people and having to meet them where they are, and you're used to that. And how often do we do things that kind of put ourself or our self-care second to serving other people? So I just wanted to spend the next 40-ish minutes or so going over some tips that have been tried and true, tested, evidence-based. And then I want to open it up for questions, because I think the more interactive we can really have this be, it'll be better for everybody. So if you do have a question, please use that chat function. And I know Vanessa will feed it to me, or we'll do it at the end. Either way. So they did my bio. What we're going to talk about is some of this right here, right? So what is wellness? What is resiliency? These are really kind of buzzwords and terms that are being tossed around heavily right now, especially with everyone in quarantine. And so I want to kind of give you my take on it and how we can see it different or better. And then we'll go over some self-care coping and numbing strategies. And I like to talk about moral injury because I really think that this profession especially is can be subject to it, just because, again, we're in the business of serving other people. And then just some takeaways, recommendations. And then again, hopefully at the end, we have some questions that I can answer, whatever they may be. So before we jump into that, though, just to stay current with the times, I wanted to just spend a moment talking about the social distancing. I think anytime there is a massive event, whatever it is, and there's a rapid change, people have the tendency to react rather than respond, and things like this happen. So social distancing really came out pretty quickly. We've been hearing about it over and over, and we know that it's 6 feet. We understand on its face what it really means. But I think that in the spirit of really understanding how much words matter, this should be physical distancing, not social distancing. And I think more importantly, what we have to understand is that what this is not social disconnection. And people, while we are facing unprecedented times, to be sure, we are facing uncertainty, to be sure. What we do know is that while uncertainty is certainly uncomfortable, it will pass. It absolutely will pass. We can look back on history, which is the best teacher, and understand that we have been through pretty significant times in our lives, in our country, and in our world's history, from world wars to different types of outbreaks to 9/11, the Great Recession, 2008. There's so many things that have caused chaos for so many people, and we know that they pass. So we will recover from this. The more important question is, like, what are we doing in the meantime, right? What I'm asking is that we not be a part of the social contagion and spreading fear, consuming all of this just negative media about how many people are dying constantly, just watching the ticker go across the screen of how many cases, and it's updating every second. And we just fixate on that, and it creates this like sense of discomfort or scare. And then we go on social media and we share that, and all we're doing is spreading this fear-based propaganda when, yeah, it's true. And I'm not saying bury our head in the sand and be oblivious. We need to stay informed. But how are we spending our time? What is it that even just today, right? Consider just today alone. What have you done this morning before this call? How much news have you consumed? What is it that you've done with your day to get up to this point? How many social media posts have you made? And so when we're talking about social distancing, it's really physical distance. It's not social disconnection. What I would ask is that we be in the spirit of spreading connection. We should be spreading connection, not the infection. Stay your physical distance, yes, but do not socially isolate. Do not disconnect from your world, from your community. We have incredible technology that'll help us get through the times that we're facing right now. So when you think of wellness, right, and there's a myriad of definitions out there on all of these terms, depending on where you look. But one of the definitions that I pulled on wellness is the state of being in good health, especially as an actively pursued goal. And what I want you to focus on from this definition is two words specifically: active pursuit. Just like motivation, just like hygiene, we have to be in active pursuit of it. Nobody takes a shower on Monday one time for the week and feels good about themselves on Friday, right? And it has to be thought about in the same way when we're talking about wellness or self-care. Over 100 years ago, they realized the benefits of hygiene. Just simply showering or bathing daily increased life expectancy by 100%. And so we now understand the benefits of hygiene. We don't do it to survive or to thrive or to increase our life expectancy. We just do it because it was part of our fabric growing up, for the most part. But specifically to wellness, this isn't like, hey, listen to this one class by Joe. We're going to sit through this for 45 minutes, and then your life is going to be significantly improved because suddenly you have wellness. This has to be part of an active pursuit. And what that means is that we should be thinking about how we can turn this into a habit, how we can turn this into part of our routine. And if you don't have a routine, obviously, the benefits of having a routine are incredibly important. There's conflicting information out there, but I've seen both 21 days or 42 days. So either 3 weeks or 6 weeks to actually develop and form a habit. Start small, but having healthy practices to start your day. And we'll talk about those here in a minute when I go through my six pillars of self-care. But having, like, starting each day on purpose, waking up with intention, not consuming, social media, emails, try and develop some type of practice to where you don't even touch your phone, maybe for the first 30 minutes after you wake up, or for the first hour, and do something for you to kind of fill yourself up to start your day on purpose. It's kind of like setting your compass for the day, right? And if you set your compass on negativity and fear and worry and anxiety and all this other stuff, then you can pretty much guarantee that that's the type of day you're going to have. If you set your day on intention of some type of, whether it's mindfulness or prayer or silence or journaling or whatever, one of the tips that we'll go through in a little bit, it can absolutely shift the course of the direction of your day. And so just be intentional about that. And again, while this is stuff that you can absolutely use, I know I'm preaching to the choir when it comes to therapists and different modalities and things that they give to their clients, but also I can tell you that I've been around it enough. I've seen it enough. I myself have suffered from it. We are very, very good. A lot of people are very good at providing people the best information in the world. And we're quite terrible at actually taking our own advice and implementing our own skill sets that we provide other people. And again, I did this for years where I was giving everyone else great advice on their life and how to improve and what they need to do or should do or could do. And it was a little bit hypocritical because I wasn't implementing those practices into my life. And so I'm happy to say now I am, and it's significantly improved my life. Next up, resilience. So the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And then this is part of the definition, and I obviously made it red and underlined it, but the word toughness comes to mind. I think specifically, if you're a man watching this or a replay of this or whatever, if you're a man watching this, we have a responsibility, right? We have done a total disservice, especially in this country, this gender bias or discrimination of like male to female. And think about our own parenting styles and how we raise our kids. If you have a boy versus a girl, not everybody, this isn't a blanket statement, but generally speaking, if you have a 3-year-old girl, she falls, scrapes her knee, we coddle her, we lift her up, we tell her it's going to be okay, we allow her to cry, we support her emotional state. If your 3-year-old son has that same experience and falls, again, for the most part, dads, we will right away say, hey, things like, hey, don't you cry, don't you dare shed a tear, come on, get up, toughen up, just wipe it off, let's go, don't you dare cry. And what we're really communicating on a subconscious level is like, hey, you are not allowed to feel your emotions. Like, I don't want you expressing your physical pain, I don't want you expressing your emotional pain, that is not okay. And then it's fascinating that when humans become 18 or 20 or whatever age you want to say, I make the lighthearted joke of, guys are talking at girls when they're 18 and 20, like, man, she's so emotional. Like, why is she so emotional? And then the girls conversely are like, he doesn't ever tell me how he feels. And it's like, because we haven't been taught how to do it, right? We shouldn't have this unfair expectation that people are just going to know how to adult just because they reach a certain age, especially depending on what their upbringing was like, what their social relationships were like, what their parenting was like in their home, if they had mentors, all that stuff goes into it. So when we talk about resilience, being tough does not mean suppressing your emotions. Being tough does not mean facing whatever troubling times. You're getting laid off from work, you're losing money, you're going through a divorce, you're losing the kids, all these things are happening. And you're in your mind, you're thinking, I have to keep all these feelings to myself. I must compartmentalize this. I must suppress these things because God forbid if I were to say something, that would be some type of sign of weakness. And, that's not acceptable. I'm here to tell you that we need to redefine what toughness is. I think being tough is absolutely owning your emotions, sharing your feelings, communicate how you feel, and doing it in a way that's authentic, but you're being vulnerable because you understand the benefits of not only getting it up and out, but that it's absolutely a demonstration for other people, which is why whenever I go and do a talk, if I'm doing a keynote somewhere, if I'm doing a training for a corporation or for an agency, I'm very quick to let them know that part of who I am is somebody who has a mental illness. That's not to like get sympathy or empathy from people or be like, oh, poor guy. It's just to show that, like, hey, look, I've been diagnosed with PTSD and depression from the VA. And so what? It's absolutely created challenges in my life to where before I understood or knew I had the diagnosis, that I didn't know what was happening other than I was just flailing through life trying to figure things out on my own, making messes everywhere. And it wasn't until I had great therapy for years that helped me understand that, I just have to see and do things different. And so through treatment, I've really been able to live an incredible quality of life for myself, but it took years. And so a lot of the things that I talk about are not just learned experiences or learned, curriculum through different books or whatever. It's actual lived experience as well through my own life. So let's be mindful of how we use words and terms because it really does matter. So here's my 6 pillars of self-care, right? So physical, emotional, psychological, spiritual, personal, and professional. And I'm going to break each one of these down. Now, what I'm asking is that you would not necessarily say, my goal is to master all 6 of these. Rather, if I can just pick out a couple things, or if I can pick out maybe 2 or 3 of these and really work hard at them, how will that improve my life? And again, the point is not to focus only on what you're already doing, because there's no doubt that as we go through these, some of them are going to resonate with you and you're going to have this feeling of like, oh, I do this, I already do that. That's part of my daily habit. That's part of my routine. And that's great. But more importantly, I want you to challenge yourself, because as you're going to see when we get into some of these, some of them are like developing a new skill or adopting a new habit. And so don't just focus on improving or polishing something you already do. Really challenge yourself to kind of step outside of the box, if you will, make yourself uncomfortable. Because again, I really believe that, directly on the other side of our biggest fears are our biggest breakthroughs, but also it's in facing our fears where we really have this like rush of growth, and we figure out a lot about ourselves. And so one more caveat, because this is super, super important. But before we get into these 6 pillars, I want you to kind of just sit for a moment with yourself and ask yourself, well, I'm going to ask the question, but I want you to really think about this question to reflect on, and not just right now, but going forward. But if I were to ask you, who are you? How would you answer that question? Right? If I were to say, who are you? What would be the first 3, 4, 5 things that come out of your mouth? Typically, because of how our society is, we are addicted to benchmarks, to achievements, to a degree, to titles. And so most people, if a complete stranger comes up and says, hey, I'm Joe, what's your name? It's whatever. Now, who are you? Right away, it's, I'm this is my profession. I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a whatever. And we start throwing these titles out there, these achievements, these things that really are super artificial. And I'm not knocking them. It takes hard work to get them. It absolutely takes perseverance and grit and all this stuff. And they're great for life. But understand that, for me personally, I'm a big believer in this Stoicism philosophy, and this whole memento mori, which is just essentially embracing death. And it's not from a morbid standpoint. It's more of like a, hey, all these things like don't go with you. Like, and life is short. We never really know when our time is going to come, but we do know our time's going to come. And the sooner we can kind of see that, accept that, and embrace that, the better. So reflect on who you are, because here's what I've learned over my life. People who, well, I'll say this. Most people, I would venture to say that a majority of people have no clue who they are. because it's in fact not your profession. It's not your title. It's not your achievements. It's not your status in the world. That's not who you are. Those are all things. Those are all things that you do. They're all temporary. Um, you know, they come and they go, and that is not what makes you who you are. And so, what I challenge people to do is sit with this idea of, why am I where I am? Why do I do what I do? And I think this is a super important question for therapists, because we know that, even if you're in private practice, even if you run your own shop, like, we don't get into this profession for the money. So why is I was called to do this? Okay, but why? And how often do you sit in reflection upon that and ask yourself these questions to really, really figure out? It's like, um, we're never mad about the thing that we think we're mad about. It's the same thing with people. Like, people are not who they tell you they are. There's like an underlying factor there. And so very, very few people actually will sit with that, and try and fully understand it. Why do you think the way you think? Why do you get mad about what you get mad about? Why do you get jealous or insecure about certain things? Like, all of those things are communicating something to you. And what we know, and what many of you know, I'm sure, through your training and therapy, is that a lot of who we are as adults, it doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, 40, 90, it doesn't matter. But a lot of the reasons why we feel the way we feel, the stories that we tell ourselves, the things that we come up with, are directly related to some part of our schema growing up, some part of our life when we were a child, some unmet need or wound that has yet to heal because we haven't processed it. And so as adults, we tend to recreate these things that'll continue to bring those up. So anyway, I just want to kind of set that framework, because it's going to be important when we're talking about 6 pillars of self-care, that we not just do things that are going to continue to allow us to deflect or avoid having to sit in front of a mirror and face ourselves, and really ask those tough questions of, why do I live here? Why do I, and I'm not talking about in this world, I'm talking about like in this house, in this city. Why am I in this state? Why do I, drive what I drive? Why do I wear what I wear? Why are the things that I feel are important to me? Why are they important to me? So I just want that to kind of swirl around in your mind as we get into these 6 here. So let's jump into it. Oops. So the first one is physical self-care. I've added quarantine style, right? So I obviously created this class probably 5-6 months ago, and it was pre-COVID-19. Obviously, no one was quarantined. I didn't even know about the coronavirus. And so when I made this class for different groups, this was things that people could easily and readily do. And so now we're having to make some certain tweaks to address, like, how does this impact me now that I'm quarantined? So like, for example, having a routine primary care physician. It's so fascinating to me when I ask this question to people, like, who has not been to a primary care doctor in the last year or 2 years? And a lot of people will raise their hand and say, like, I haven't been. Because why? Because I'm healthy, I'm in shape, I go to the gym. I don't feel like I need to go to a doctor. And to me, it's like, if you have insurance, especially, why are we not going? Most routine physical exams, you get an annual exam, it's free, get blood work done, but there's so much that can be done on the preventative side. And I'm a firm believer, like, a lot of the training that I create, a lot of the courses that I put on, they're all on the preventative side. There's a lot of people who focus on the after the fact, like active shooter. Like, yeah, that's great to have an active shooter drill, but that's assuming that we're going to have an active shooter. What is there something that we can do that would prevent the active shooter from ever happening? And that's just an example. So I like to work on the prevention side more than the reaction side. And I think that if we were to develop really, really strong, solid, honest self-care practices, it would absolutely increase and benefit, and enhance our lives. Food and diet. Right. I know that this is crammed down our throats, the importance of food, diet, sleep, exercise, all that stuff. They kind of all go together, but they don't. They all stand on their own. And here's what I would say, because again, I'm going to be honest. I'm a proud Italian man. I love pizza. I eat it weekly. I could eat pasta 5 days a week. Like, I don't have the best diet. I'm just going to be honest. So because I know I don't have the best diet, I really try and make sure that I have good sleep. And that's just, for me, sleep is very important. I know if I sleep well, that's going to have a benefit for me. And again, I'm not trying to be a master of all of these. I was in the Marine Corps, and exercise was forced upon me. I'm not a big fan of it. I mean, I love walking my dog. I like doing sports. So if I'm playing sports, I'm all in for exercise. But to like go to the gym every day and lift weights and do all that, just not a big fan. It doesn't excite me. Massages, it's me time, right? Manicure, pedicure, massage. It, what it's really doing is it's communicating to yourself that, hey, I am important enough that I'm going to take time selfishly for me to do something positive. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So how can we do this now? If you have a partner, if you have kids, if you have whatever, like have fun with this. YouTube it. That's the beautiful thing about the time that we live in right now. I can't imagine if this coronavirus happened, pre like 1990, and we had no internet, no like a technology to help us support us through these times. What would that look like? I have no idea, but I don't even want to imagine it. We can YouTube almost everything. Look at a video, give your partner a massage, spend time. It's another way to connect. Super important. And then physical intimacy, and forgive me in advance, but again, I want to stay consistent because I say this to all groups, but physical intimacy, especially men, does not just mean penetration. While sex is very important, they did this study where they found that a 23-second hug releases 12 hours of oxytocin, which is the equivalent of a workout. And so I tell men especially, like, hey, the next time you're going to hug your partner or even your buddy, obviously not right now, but again, if you have people in your home, nothing wrong with doing a 23-second hug. And of course, it's much easier to consider when we're talking about family. But when we're talking about our friends or our buddy or, whatever, and I tell them, like, the next time you go in for your bro hug, dap them up, bring them in, and then just hold them and say, nah, not yet, man. Don't let go, and start counting. And you'll have a really, really good experience. It'll make them super uncomfortable, but here's what we know, right? It's going to incite laughter, which is another pillar or part of the pillar of self-care coming up. And those release endorphins, which are going to make us feel good. And so physical touch is super important. Human physical touch, because coming up is touch with a pet or cuddling with a pet, which is great, which is a good transition into emotional self-care. So cuddling with a pet obviously has benefits. Chemically, again, it's going to make us feel better. I just got a golden doodle the end of December. Super, super happy. It has significantly improved my life. And, it's important because, again, regardless of whatever reason or why, but I really believe, and this isn't to be, crass or funny or sarcastic, but I really think that with a dog, especially, or with animals, it can be a cat if you're a cat person, but with dogs, if it's just me and my dog and I take them for a walk, which one, I'm taking a walk, so that's a physical exercise, so that's good. But two, if I'm just having a terrible day, dogs actually have a very, very unique ability to smell or sense emotions. And so they tend to wrap around, and they're very, very, because they don't have a mind per se, they can't think, they don't create stories like humans do. They're just going to always 100% of the time accept you exactly as you are. And whatever you tell them, whatever frustration you vent onto them verbally, they're going to forget about, not care, or forgive you immediately. And humans have a very, very hard time doing that, especially if it's an emotional relationship. It's very hard to tell your spouse something and not think or believe that it's going to come up later in some way or shape or form. So dogs are just a great safe space to kind of get stuff up and out. Explore a new hobby, right? I tell people, because I'm all about self-assessments, and we'll do one here in a little bit, but if you are exactly the same person today as you were 1 year ago, meaning you have the same skill sets, you haven't achieved any new goal that you've set for yourself, you haven't done anything that's increased your ability in life, then like you are stuck in the rat wheel. Like you're stuck in this just pattern of habitual behavior. And here's what we know about the human conditioning is that it starts very young. And I love breaking people's lives down into thirds, right? So if you sleep 8 hours a day, let's just imagine, a lot of people don't, because there's absolutely a sleep epidemic in our country. But if you sleep 8 hours a day, that's 1/3 of your life gone, just gone into the subconscious. We are sleeping. 1/3 of your entire life is gone to sleep. 1/3 of our life is spent on education or work. So when we're a kid at school, when we're adults, it's working, career, whatever. And think about, for those of you that work more than 8 hours, it's more than 1/3 of that time. But we spend a lot of our time in profession, in job, and career. So that leaves 1/3 left. And they suggest half of that 1/3 is on maintaining the life. So really, we have such a small sliver, and that's not to be depressing. It's just to like wake you up to realize, like, wow, so much of what I do is habit. Like I don't even think about it, right? I wake up, I do the same routine, I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I take a shower, I eat the same thing, I make my coffee, I drive the same way to work, I do the same thing at work, I work from home, even more something to pay attention to if you are working from home. And I'll talk about that here towards the end. Because we have to be super mindful of that. And everybody's working from home right now for the most part. And so being mindful of that. I'm a firm believer that if somebody is depressed, one of the best and first cures before medication is volunteering, community engagement. Do something for somebody else. Neuroscience supports that we will get a huge dump of endorphins, feel good, emotional wave when we volunteer for somebody else selflessly. It's not selfishly. If we're doing it to get something from somebody, it's not going to make us feel good. But if we're truly volunteering for a cause, if we're doing something for somebody out of just the goodness of our heart because we know it needs to be done, incredibly difficult to stay in a depression or in a rut, especially if it's a situational depression, if you're serving other people. I talked about laughing, the benefits of that. Again, go in for a 23-second hug as soon as this physical distancing lifts. Go in for a 23-second hug on someone that's not your family. And I'd love to hear about what kind of experience you and they have, because I think it's fascinating. And I'm trying to spread 23-second hugs all over the place because, let's be honest, like, isn't that way better than the alternative of like avoiding, not like shaking hands, not to, again, knowing the benefits of touch? Why not? So also crying. Kleenex did a study, of all people, maybe selfishly, but the Kleenex did a study of measuring like the toxicity of our tears. And so what I tell, again, anytime I have men in the room when I'm talking, I say, for all people, but again, especially men, I said, I'm willing to bet that in the last year, at least one point in time, you had the desire to cry, you welled up with tears, you had the lump in your throat, but you suppressed it. However you suppress it, right? You start flashing yourself, whatever that does, waving yourself, you start like, deep breathing. We do whatever we can to suppress those tears because, again, in our mind, if I let this tear fall, it communicates something about me. That is nonsense. We know it's nonsense. And Kleenex supports the fact that, again, your body is communicating something to you. It's no different than going to the bathroom, right? We urinate, we defecate because our body is trying to get rid of stuff that we don't need. It's the same thing with sneezing. It's the same thing with our nose running. It's the same thing with crying. But for whatever reason, we have all this like judgment about what it would mean if a tear fell out of my eye. Again, let's redefine toughness. So psychological self-care. I asked you the question before I got into these 6 pillars, right? So who are you? And I'm a firm believer in self-reflection. Self-reflection on the day, self-reflection on a moment, self-reflection on life. The more time we spend curious, the less time we spend in judgment. And it's no accident that journaling is on here as well. Therapy and counseling. Are you a therapist that just because you provide therapy believes that it makes you immune to therapy? Or are you a therapist that believes like, no, because I'm a therapist, I need a therapist? I know a lot of therapists that have therapists. I think it's super, super important because, again, who are you going to turn to? You're taking on a lot of people's baggage. You're volunteering to essentially carry so many people's weight. And so where do you offload that? What space do you have to offload the weight that you're carrying of other people's? And so I think it's, if you haven't watched my TEDx talk, I would love for you to watch it. You can just YouTube my name. But the whole premise of that was everybody should have a therapist. And that's how I opened up the talk with, and I don't care who you are, what you've done, what you do, where you live, it doesn't matter what you have, you should have a therapist. And the point of that is, because of my earlier point that as human beings, we don't grow up with a skill set of connection. We don't grow up with a skill set of learning how to listen, how to actively listen, how to develop good, effective communication skill set. We don't have it, right? And it's a very selfish type of society that's about me, 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 me. And so how can we show up for other people? It's very difficult. So having you have a therapist who's trained to really have those boundaries, to like just let you offload all that stuff, validate your emotions, make you feel that it's absolutely okay to feel the way you feel, and then process through it. It's a great way to kind of reset. So mindfulness and meditation. I'm curious of how many people already have these practices in place. I'm also curious on how many people are like, yeah, not me, it's not happening. There's absolute power in stillness. It's why, if you don't understand the science of what's happening in our brains when we sleep, but our brain is actually healing itself when we sleep. Not only that, it's making physical connections, it's solving problems. Like the saying, like, let me sleep on it. It's not just some saying that came up. It's based on science of like, hey, I might have a better answer for you after I sleep, because connections are actually being made. And so if you fall asleep with a problem, try and allow yourself to fall asleep with it. Don't make decisions when you're tired, just like don't make decisions when you're emotional. But having the time set aside on purpose to, again, whatever it is for you, prayer, meditate, being mindful of this meal. I went through this 8-week course called Mindfulness-Based Stress Reduction, and she made us eat this raisin. But normally those little boxes of raisins, I kind of shake them, I open the top, I like throw the whole thing in my mouth, chew, and then I swallow. That's how I eat a box of raisins. And she made us mindfully eat one raisin, which took about 6 minutes, and it was brutal. But I understood the point of it, right? And if we slow down, because we live on this like this fast pace, fast pace, fast pace. And so we just have to learn to slow down a bit, and allow ourselves to experience life around us. And you'd be amazed at kind of what's happening. Journaling. I'm a huge believer in journaling. I just picked up this one called One Line a Day. I love the idea of it. I got it from Ryan Holiday. And, it's a 5-year basically journal that each page is the day of the year, and there's 5 lines of each page. And so next year it'll be on that same page. And it's just a great way to kind of keep track of your life. So I'll know, I just started it like 5 days ago, but I'll know next year on this day that I did this webinar for SonderMind, and have a feeling of gratitude come up, because again, I think it's important that we record our life's events, especially the positive moments. So I don't know how this is going to work, but I want to try it. I imagine people are listening in. Hopefully you're actually sitting here listening, trying to pay attention. If you're doing this distractedly or driving, it's obviously not going to work. But for it, just in case someone is listening, I usually do this in a group. But to prove this point of some of the benefits of mindfulness, and again, if you are someone who understands the conditioned mind and a conditioned response, you might chalk it off as that's what's happening, but I want to just try it. So it's just a quick little 30-second guided meditation just to see if something happens, and then we'll move on from it. But wherever you're sitting, as long as it's safe in your home and you're not driving, just if it's quiet, it would help, but just close your eyes and relax. And I just want you to take a deep breath and just focus on exactly what you're feeling right now, your feet on the floor, whatever chair you're sitting in. And with your eyes closed, you're not going to get up. You're not going to go do anything other than in your mind. And I just want you to try and follow me on this quick little journey. And right where you're sitting, I want you to just imagine standing up and walking into your kitchen. And I want you to open the refrigerator. And in the refrigerator, you have one of those drawers that has produce in it. And I want you to open the drawer and pull out a lemon. And you can feel it on your hand. It's cold, it's wet. And I want you to walk it over to your counter. Now, open up one of the drawers that you have a cutting board in, or maybe it's already on the counter. And now I want you to grab a knife and I want you to cut the lemon in half. And you can see the juice flowing out onto the cutting board. And with half of that lemon, I want you to bring it up to your nose and just take a big sniff of it. And then stick your tongue out and lick it. And now I want you to set it back down on the cutting board and open your eyes. Okay, now that's weird. It's quick. It's a webinar. I can't see you guys. I have no idea. Half of you might even hung up right now. I have no idea. But if anyone tried it, and I do this in a group in front of people, it's fun for me because I'm seeing their faces and I can see when they get that response. So when I tell them to smell it or lick it, obviously they start getting some like salivating in their jaw, or they like start swallowing, or they're make this like wincing face with their eyes. And so the point that I say to that is there's no lemons in this room. I didn't spray anything. Just by thinking alone of the smell of a lemon, licking a lemon, we had a physiological response. And so why does that matter? If we can think about a lemon, if we can think of the scent of a lemon, and we can create our mouth to salivate, or we can create that like tingle or that sour feeling in our mouth simply by thought. If that is true, then it must also mean that if our thoughts are negative, if they're fear-based, if they're anxiety-based, if they're worry-based, if they're constantly stuck in this like the world's going to end, doom, 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 then absolutely there's a physiological response happening in our body. Right, with cortisol, hardening of the heart, there's things that are happening, and we know that stress is toxic. It's a toxic chemical that will absolutely lead to an earlier death. And so it's important that we think about positive emotions. And essentially, that's what resiliency is. So positive emotions fuel resiliency. Self-affirmation, a huge way to start the day. So I don't know if anyone did that or it worked or not, but it's fun for me. So spiritual self-care is not you must go to church or else, you must love Jesus or else. It's not. You can be an atheist. You can be exactly who you are, how you are. It really does not matter. Spiritual self-care is far beyond that. It's about practicing forgiveness. Think back. I would be shocked if everyone listening to this has not been wronged by somebody in their life, especially, again, go back to your childhood days. When you were growing up, did anyone ever bully you, make fun of you, hurt you? Did a parent do you wrong? Were you abused physically, emotionally, sexually? If you're still carrying that, if you have not forgiven people, understand that just in the power of forgiveness, that, again, the only person that it really is hurting is you. And so understanding the importance of forgiveness and true forgiveness, spending time in nature. This is one of the things, I don't know where everybody's at. I know the cities, but we're still allowed to go outside as long as we're practicing physical distancing. One of the things that I like to do with my wife is we go mountain biking. And so again, we're outdoors, we're on our mountain bikes, and we can ride through trails. It's good exercise. It's fun. It's time in nature. And so it's something that we can still do because it is good to get outside. It is good to get fresh air. Just do it responsibly. Singing. So if you're not familiar, we have a nerve called the vagus nerve. And anytime we're singing, we're stimulating that nerve. And what's essentially doing is it's sending a signal through our body of, I am safe, I am well, I am happy, which is why like nobody that's being traumatized or victimized is singing. They don't go together. So I put a post out this morning saying this, but like if you're home, which most of you are or should be, put on Alexa or put on YouTube or whatever and crank it up and just sing. Like have a home karaoke with your kids or your spouse. Or if you live alone, then even better, because maybe you're not a good singer anyway. So like have at it, like belt it out, because what you're really doing is you're sending subconscious signals, you're sending chemical signals into your body that like, I am safe, I am well, I am going to be okay. So when in doubt, sing, sing, sing. Same thing, dancing, yoga, moving your body. Yoga is not just about stretching. It's obviously a much deeper practice. And I know that there's a lot of yoga instructors that are in therapy or therapists that also do yoga. There's a lot of overlap because they understand the benefits of that. And then again, volunteering, it's no mistake that it keeps coming up because it really is that important. Personal self-care. Plan and set goals, not just on your own, selfishly, individually. If you have other humans in your house, it should be a collective. Bring your kids in on it. Bring your partner in on it, because everyone needs to be on the same page under one roof. If you have a goal of running a marathon, then they need to know that you're going to be working towards that running. If you have a goal to grow a business, then they need to know that you're going to be maybe working on a business plan or spending time doing something. Whatever your goals are, make sure that everyone's on the same page for what it is. Learn a new skill. Again, challenge yourself. Become more than what you are today. Whatever that is. I love this. I heard this the other day on Tom Bilyeu. I was listening to him. He has a channel called Impact Theory. And he says that he asks all of his employees, if a magic genie were to come and you had one wish and the only rule was you couldn't wish for more wishes, what would it be? And this is games we used to play as kids, but I love that we're doing it as adults, because you should allow yourself to dream big. And then I would say that whatever that dream is, and wherever you are, the only thing standing between those two things is yourself, right? Is your willingness, your desire, your ability, your confidence to overcome that chasm. And so dream, like there's nothing wrong with dreaming, but then what I would ask is that you actually do the work to achieve it and see what happens. Read a book to completion. I've been doing this a lot from this half working from home life that I've had. I've been reading a lot. I love it. I love it. I love it because I am somebody who used to hate reading, but there's something that is very, very reassuring on a confidence level when you read a book to completion. Again, not just the cover, not the foreword, but actually reading a book to completion and then reflect on who you are, but truly, not just who you are, but like why you think the way you think, feel the way you feel, do the things you do. It's important. And then last one is professional self-care. So these were the, when everybody was working self. So I would say enjoy your lunch break, but actually enjoy it. Don't work at lunch. Leave work at work. Well, now I'm working from home. So how's that going to work out? Take a mental health day. Learn to say no, which is really essentially setting boundaries. Use your time off. And so now that we have to work from home, how can I leave work at work? What I would say is do your work in a certain space. If you have an office or a study or a guest bedroom, maybe set a place in your house that is your workspace and only do your work from that space. Don't do it all over the house, because what you're doing is you're setting yourself up for failure of believing that you're always on, and which violates your boundaries. So don't always be on. Allow yourself to work in one space when you're supposed to be at work. Other than that, turn off as much as possible. Actually take a lunch break. Even people working from home should be getting breaks or lunch breaks. Take it. Turn your phone off, put it away. Like you can still have professional self-care, even if you're having to work in the confines of your home. And, you know, it's Good Friday today. Most people are off, even people working from home. So, you know, I'm glad that the people who have joined this webinar are here, but whatever you've done before this, whatever you're going to do after this, I just hope that it's beneficial and serving to improve or enhance your life. So I'm going to, yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm sorry. We had a question, if I could just go back real quick.
Please.
So we had a question from somebody saying, normally I don't share my fears or personal challenges with coworkers. How can I start doing that in a way that won't jeopardize my job or make people think I'm quote unquote losing it?
Yeah, so this is a fascinating thing that I learned years ago from a licensed therapist that used to work with us, and she's since moved on. But she was saying, and again, I know that it's very different because my wife was licensed in Iowa, and then she moved here, and just the work she had to do to get it transferred, and it's a different world. But this therapist I was talking to said that it was like in her license or a clause that basically was saying that, essentially was saying that she's not allowed to like emote or have these feelings that would jeopardize like her ability to become a therapist. And I think, you know, it's one thing to be like, hey, I'm a therapist and then suddenly I'm 26 and I have schizophrenia. Okay. But I really struggle with this idea that because of my profession, I'm not allowed to be a human being. And again, this isn't a selfish plug, but if you have not watched Ernie and Joe, Crisis Cops on HBO, I would ask that you watch it, because, you know, it shows my day job as being a police officer, but I'm absolutely doing that. And I think as therapists, as police officers, as paramedics, as firefighters, as doctors, as nurses, we are all frontline first responders. All of us are on some capacity in these people serving forward facing professions. That is not an excuse or a crutch to not be human being. And I would say that a lot of what we believe is based on stories that we've told ourselves. So do we know for sure that if I were to share my feelings that I'm going to get that type of response? Or is it just a belief that we've created for ourselves as a barrier or a block to not do it? I would say that there's two kind of tracks there. If you've tried it, if you're like, no, I've went to a colleague and I've told her how I was feeling or told him how I was feeling, and this was the consequence of the repercussion, then that's different. Then that's something that, like, that says something more about that other person. It doesn't define the opportunity. If you've never tried it, then I would say we can't really say how we're going to respond or feel if we haven't ever tried it. That's why it's so important for me to be who I am, where I am all the time. I say I'm unapologetically, authentically, vulnerably me. I'm willing to share my story, to tell people, not, again, not to get a rise or to have people feel for me, but when I share my testimony, when I did my TED, when I did the movie, it really, I say in there that I was sexually abused as a kid, that I was emotionally abused, that I was physically abused, that I left home at 15. Because I, through therapy, have worked through this. And as a person who's a Marine Corps combat veteran and a police officer in a big city, people don't expect me as a man to share my feelings. I cry, I get emotional. I love Oprah Winfrey. Like, and guess what? It's okay, right? It's okay. And so I've proved to myself that while other people might judge me, that's for them to deal with, right? That's not my responsibility. I'm comfortable in my own skin to be who I am, where I am. If some person is making you feel a certain way based on something you've said, that doesn't communicate. Don't run with the story that it's always going to be that way, or this profession doesn't allow me to be. What I would say is that one person didn't allow you. It wasn't a safe space for you. And that's for them to deal with. Don't give up, because again, what we know is that people who suffer in silence, absolutely, it's not only a predictor for suicide, but it's a predictor for a pretty miserable life. Because if I don't feel I have somebody that I can trust to reach out to engage with, to offload my pack carrying all this other weight, then what am I supposed to do with it? And that's where we turn to maladaptive coping strategies. I, as a therapist, as a licensed person, as a whatever, as a doctor, as a nurse, as a cop, as a whoever, I don't have someone I can turn to. So I'm going to drink more. I'm going to take these pills more. I'm going to do this thing that really numbs me out. That way I don't have to feel things. And again, this can be in many, 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 many variations. Watching TV all day, numbing out. Porn addictions, numbing out. Playing video games all day long, numbing out. If we're not doing something that's going to improve ourselves, improve our life, then there's a chance that it's probably not a good thing. And how I tell people to measure this is ask yourself two questions. Whatever the coping strategy is that you're using, would you do it in front of your spouse or partner? And would you do it in front of your boss? If the answer is yes and yes, then it's probably a very healthy skill. If the answer is no or yes and no, it's probably not so healthy. If it's no, it's probably really unhealthy. And again, the example I use is porn, because a lot of the people that I work with and talk to and help, that's a real thing for them. And because they deal with it on their own, or when nobody's watching or nobody's home and they don't feel like anyone else is suffering from this, what we know from just the brain science is that somebody who's addicted to porn is actually more unhealthy than somebody who's addicted to cocaine from a brain chemical standpoint. And so people believe that just because I'm consuming this material, and no one knows about it, it's not affecting anyone. What's actually happening is you are completely detaching yourselves from your emotional state, and you're creating this opportunity for yourself to be emotionally unavailable or detached. And that's where a lot of people who don't know how to process, don't know how to get things up and out in a healthy way, tend to fall in those maladaptive coping strategies. So again, I ask, like, how do you spend your time? Thanks for that, Vanessa. I hope I answered their question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So numbing and avoiding, again, it kind of goes with what I was just talking about, but we have to first understand that acceptance is a huge part of this, because everybody has numbing behaviors. Everybody. Why? Because we're human beings wearing these fleshy suits. There is nobody who has gone through life without developing or creating or having some type of numbing behavior. Because again, people can take any um, object or experience or thing and turn it into a negative. And what I mean by that, I use the example of working out or going to the gym. So if I were to ask, like, hey, do you think working out is good for you? Yeah, absolutely. Do you think exercise is good? Absolutely. But then what if it's a husband who's working out every single day, 3 to 4 hours at a gym, and it's like from 4:30 when he gets off of work till 8:30. And so because of his obsession with going to the gym, he doesn't get to pick up his kids from school, he doesn't do homework, he doesn't have family dinner. Would you then say now that's a problem? Yes, it is. And so why is he going to the gym that much for so long? And what is he trying to numb from? And some would have a very, very quick argument to, like, no, I'm not trying to numb. It's important to me to, like, get up to a certain weight, or I want to be strong so I can feel a certain way, or I wanna, or I wanna, or I wanna. And what really it comes down to is, hey, I have this selfish desire that I'm putting as a priority over my responsibility, which is my family. And I'm not going to see it any other way, because I am it's a drug. I'm feeding something in me. I'm feeding a void that lives within me because I have some unmet need somewhere. And, and so knowing that we all numb, again, a lot of people, it's exercise, it's food, it's relationships, it's TV, it's, if we're consuming too much of something, it becomes bad. So again, why do we avoid? It's because I call emotions dirty diapers. And especially if you grew up in a home that didn't support this idea of emoting and sharing, expressing yourself and how you feel. If you didn't sit around the dinner table at night and have your parents ask, like, hey, so tell me how everyone's feeling today, which I know for a fact most people did not have that experience. I strongly encourage everyone to look into the ACEs study. If you haven't, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study. It's a free little assessment you can do online, but don't just take the assessment and then freak out about it, because it could trigger things within people. Actually look into it and understand the science behind it and what they're really trying to communicate. But it's a great resource because it really correlates from childhood trauma to the public health problem in adulthood. But not just that, it's a myriad of factors that ACEs contribute to. But when we talk about avoidance, ultimately that's what we're doing, is we're saying, I want to avoid confronting something, a person, an emotion, a problem, or I'm avoiding having to feel a certain way. And so it's like why people use hardcore drugs, right? Like methamphetamine, rampant in our city. And so many people are using meth because, and I just had one 2 days ago tell me, he said, I use meth because it's so much easier than having to sit in my feelings and deal with how miserable my life is. Like, that's a real problem, especially when you understand the chemical effects of methamphetamine on the dopamine and what it does. Those are serious problems, because people would rather have some other option to avoid having to feel or sit in their dirty diaper. But what I say is, the dirty diaper or the emotion is absolutely, I heard this the other day, your emotions are the language of your subconscious. So sit in that diaper, right? Like, sit there and ask yourselves, why do I feel this way? What is this communicating to me? What's the lesson to be learned here? Because what we also know is that the longer you avoid that emotion or that problem or that person or that feeling, the further down the line you're pushing it, the bigger it's going to become. And we're going to have to confront all of our problems one day. We just hope that they're not when you're, a geriatric person or a widow and you're 70, 80, 90 years old, alone in your thoughts. We can do this now. We just have to be willing to do it. And then understanding the purpose, behind our behaviors. Um, you know, when I ask the question of who we are, um, sit with that. Like, why are we doing the things we do? Why do I like doing this thing? Again, I don't think people spend enough time sitting with that question of why do I do this behavior or this thing? And before I wrap, because I know I'm running close to my time, so I started my clock when I started. And I'm about 57 minutes. I just want to leave you with a couple things. So everyone's heard of compassion fatigue or burnout. We get it tossed around a lot in our professions, but what I want you to understand is that like you are the victim, and that's absolutely okay. When I hear compassion fatigue or burnout, I think that we're essentially blaming the victim. Moral injury is more in alignment with what's actually happening. So everyone, again, got into our professions for some reason, and maybe you don't know what it is, but I would venture to say that you got into this profession because you asked yourself, or I'm sorry, you got into this profession because the answer was, I want to help other people. And then once you get caught up in the system and you realize that it's about far more than helping people, it's about like this repetition and money and the business side of it and insurance and all that. And you're like, oh my goodness, we can very, very quickly become morally injured because the system is challenging our moral compass or our beliefs. And so just think about that. Look into moral injury. I think it's important. Here's my 5 takeaways, my recommendations. Again, everybody needs a therapist. Have a daily gratitude journal. I think it's super, super important. We should be journaling daily, even if it's just a gratitude journal. Mindfulness meditation. Learn a new skill, whether it's a hobby, a habit, or whatever it is. Come up with something and then volunteer. Even during these trying times, there is a way that we can volunteer and serve other people, even if it's just a message online, some type of support for one of the frontline workers, a doctor, a nurse, a hospital, a first responder, whatever it is. We can volunteer and serve other people for sure. And finally, this is my contact. I just put my Twitter at Joe Smarro, my email if you want it. This resource here, text help. You can really text almost any word to that 741-741, and it's just a 24/7 text resource for people. It's a safe, confidential. And so for that therapist that asked that question, I mean, this is a good place that you could start if you wanted to just kind of work through something. But what I would say is like, be a pioneer. Just because no one around you is maybe sharing their feelings with coworkers, who's to say you can't or shouldn't be the first one? With that, I am at 59:40. And Vanessa, were there more questions by chance or no? Was that the one?
We can leave it open to anybody that has questions. Thank you, Joe. Please feel free to type them into the chat box and we'll be sure to address any of those. Right now, we'll take a few minutes to do that. I did have one question on the side, but you pretty much answered it. Just to be clear, what can people who aren't in the healthcare field or maybe not mental health professionals, what can they do to kind of provide support for the community? And you kind of touched on things like volunteer work, self-care, obviously things like that, but just kind of the hugs within the family if you're somebody that lives in your home. So if you have more to add to that, that's kind of the takeaway I had from it.
Yeah, I think, I've seen several things recently online, but, if you know a first responder, reach out to them directly and thank them, a doctor, a nurse, a therapist, whatever it is. I mean, just a personal note goes a long way. There's nothing wrong with ordering food. You could have food delivered to a hospital, to an ER, and because they have protocols, they have procedures in place where they can do that safely. One of the businesses that are absolutely booming right now is the food delivery business because everyone's pivoted. And so if you want to just have a way to say thanks for doing the work you're doing, it goes a long way when you just put a little handwritten note saying, hey, just thinking about you during these times, appreciate the work you're doing, or again, use the I see you. And and just sending some food to some frontline workers really, really goes a long way. So other than that, you could post a video just being thankful. And again, positive media is important. It's easy to spread fear. It's easy to spread terrible data and statistics about how many people are dying, and get people to rally around that. But, you know, it's also, I would say it's more important that we spend time actually sending positive vibes and positive messages and messages of support, and see if we can get those to go viral. So that would be my best advice for how we can help those if we're not in the profession ourselves.
Thank you. Those were awesome ideas, great ideas. We do have a question over here on the side. As a single mature female with a pup, solo practice, decades-long yoga / meditation practice, I appreciate your message. The physical distancing is challenging as I am beginning my 5th week of sheltering in place. Just appreciate this time. Thank you. Awesome. More of a statement. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. And again, I want to be mindful of the social distancing, but like maybe you can, like we could get out of control. Maybe you have 15 feet between you, but maybe meet up with someone outside in a very open space. I know like parks are closed, but I think they have trails open, and I know it's different wherever you are. So if you're truly being forced to be in your home, unless it's a grocery store or something, then yes, you're doing the right thing. But I know here we're still allowed to use like trailways and hikes and things like that. So maybe that's something that you could do.